Hey everyone, and welcome back to the wonderful world of weddings. I am so happy to have you here. My name is Daniel Krikorian, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into everything that comes with the financial responsibilities of a wedding. I have Gerry from Making Money Last on WCRN, which is actually wonderful because we are on WCRN and we love having our other guests here to come on in and provide more information. Before we do that, I want to let you know to go to BeRememberedWeddings.com for all of your wedding needs, from photography, videography, event planning, DJ, coordination, makeup, photo booth, and more. Please reach out to us. We love making your wedding dreams a reality to have a wonderful wedding. So go to BeRememberedWeddings.com and talk with us today to find all of your wedding needs. Now, I have Gerry. Gerry has been a financial advisor for quite some time now and really works with couples of all age, correct?
I do. Couples of all ages, but we do have a specific focus on retirement planning, but we do a lot for people.
Yeah, but retirement starts early.
Yeah. Retirement does start early. The earlier you start, the better off you're going to be in retirement. No question about that, Dan.
Absolutely. Yeah. And before the show, we were talking about this idea that you're taking two independent individuals and now we're putting them together.
Right.
That's a very difficult thing for a lot of people to handle.
It's a difficult thing for a lot of people to handle, mixing of finances. It depends on what age the wedding takes place. So I think if you're a little bit younger, where you haven't accumulated a lot of assets so far, it's probably a little bit easier to combine those assets together.
Yep.
I think maybe after somebody has gone through one marriage, divorced, now getting into a second marriage, they might be a little bit more reticent to allow somebody into their finances, and also they may have a little bit more. So I think it depends on what stage in life you're at, probably.
Yeah.
You know, how easy it is or how difficult it is to mix those assets together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, overall, we're trying on this podcast to give people as much advice as humanly possible leading up to that big day. And so much of the big day is dependent upon budget, and I'm going to say superficial, but I don't mean it in a negative way. I'm talking about your photography, your videography, but there is so much that occurs after that day, big day, and so much you have to plan for. And the financial piece, I think, gets missed. We are budgeting for a wedding, which usually mom and dad are budgeting for. And so mom and dad listening in, that's something that they should consider, even though I think last time we did our statistics, we found that a large portion of couples are now using financial options or their own savings account for a wedding, which is absolutely correct.
Well, I have 3 daughters, and I have not only funded college educations, I've also funded weddings. So that I'm speaking from firsthand experience. It's I think it very often is the parents, or many times it's a combination of everything. Right. The parents may have a finite amount of money that they can set aside to dedicate toward the wedding. And that's, a big help when you look at these average wedding costs. Typically, it's going to be a big help. Yeah. So it might be kind of a group effort many times.
Yeah, and that's actually a great way to lead right into one of the first things I wanted to chat with you about, because in Massachusetts, we have a very odd breakdown of household income when it comes to weddings. And about 30% of our market is a $200,000 plus household income. And you see that those people are spending about $178,000 on their wedding. And so I started thinking to myself, how does someone determine that much money? And I think in Massachusetts, we have a high degree of wealth, right? We have a lot of colleges, we have a lot of great jobs and opportunities. So that to me seems like it's a combination of not only a great career path for two individuals coming together, but also parents who probably are feeding into that. My parents are actually one of them. My parents have their own, my father has his own business, my mother has a great job, and they went ahead and they said, hey, to my sister, here's the amount of money we're spending, which was a large degree, a typical average wedding. And then she said, okay, well, I want what I want. And they added the rest on. And so there's that combination of financials that comes into play,
Well, it's hard for me to imagine somebody who's making $200,000 a year who's going to spend $178,000 on a wedding.
Right.
Very hard for me to imagine that. Even if you've been making $200,000 a year for a good number of years, $178,000 on one day is an awfully large amount of money.
Yes.
And there has to be some pretty creative financing to come up with $178,000. Right. When you look at divorce rates, I think it's probably makes the picture even a little bit scarier.
Right.
I think that, for younger people, divorce rates have actually gone down, which is a really good thing. Family formation is so important to the country, pivotal to the country, no question. Yep. But divorce rates for older couples over the age of 50 have actually gone up.
Yeah.
And it may be because, older couples very often have gone through one divorce. So maybe it makes that second divorce
easier,
a little bit easier for them to go through.
Well, they also just found Tinder, and that's a problem.
Yes, and there's a lot of online trouble out there. I agree with you, Dan.
A lot of online trouble and a lot of online options.
Right, high school sweethearts reconnecting with high school sweethearts. But now everybody's in their 60s. Right. It's a formula for disaster. Yeah. But I do think that it has to start any of the wedding planning with, figuring out what budget do you want to spend. $178,000 sounds kind of high to me. Yeah. You and I were discussing before the program, here in Massachusetts, you have an average wedding cost of around $41,000, somewhere in that range. Yeah. That sounds pretty reasonable. And I have to tell you, for the weddings that I have funded and I did pay for, that's about the range that they were in. Yeah. Maybe $35,000 to $40,000. One of them was actually a backyard wedding as well. But, between catering and a band and all the different things, photographers, videographers, you have gifts for the guests, the invitations, the flowers. Yeah. You start to add all of this up, and it adds up relatively quickly. Each item is a couple of $1,000s at least. Yep. I think, with the main items being probably the venue and the catering. Yes. And then maybe getting into the videography, into what you're doing. Yeah, absolutely. And, when we talk about this relative to the average across the country, which is $29,000. However, the one thing that I do want to bring up for the $200,000 plus household income, what I think is occurring here too is, these are usually high status individuals and they have more friends and family. And so the mom and the father side of things here of both parties say, look, we need all of these high value friends to come. They need to feel like they're included. And so I think that really drives up the price. And I say that only because the next tier down, the $150,000 to $200,000 household income, drops down to $68,000 on average. That's a big drop. And so, the question is, and that makes up about 17% of the market before we sit right into the average. But the average in Massachusetts is actually $100,000 to $150,000, and that makes up 27% of the market. And they spend only $50,000. And so, which sounds a lot more reasonable. And when you say, over $200,000, that's capturing people who are making $1 million a year.
Absolutely.
So maybe they can afford a $178,000 wedding. But, at that $200,000 threshold, I can't imagine spending almost approximating a year's income on just one day. Yeah. It seems like it's a colossal expense.
Absolutely. And, talking about age and the divorce is actually a great way to, this is so fascinating because every single older couple I speak to says to me, Dan, it's our second wedding. We're not going to go all out for it. We're not going to spend as much. Okay. Sounds great. Now, there's actually some of the best couples to work with. I love working with them. But the interesting thing is, on average, they're spending $34,000 on their wedding for 55 to 59. But the next greatest grouping of individuals, 25 to 35, they're spending 33. So they're one of the highest spenders. And so you think, why is that occurring?
Well, Dan, as you know, you can't go out to dinner in Massachusetts for less than $35,000, right, on a Friday or Saturday night. Right. It's kind of difficult. Yeah. I think I think a lot of wedding costs. There are a lot of variables. First wedding, second wedding, third wedding, as we were talking about, and the budgets probably do go down a little bit with each of those tiers. Time of year. Yeah. What season you're doing this wedding, the size of the wedding. Are you going to have 30 people at the wedding, or are you going to have 300 people? Right. At the wedding? That can all determine, the cost of it. Location, if you're going to be in the Boston area, in Boston itself, that's going to be one expense. If you're going to be outside of Boston, in the Worcester area, or maybe in one of the suburbs, it'll probably drop off a little bit. Or you're going to have a destination wedding. Right. One of my daughters, she was telling me, I was in Florida last weekend and brought her and her husband down with us and their baby. And, she was saying that they were leaving in a few weeks to go to a wedding in Mexico, and it's a big expense, for them to do that. Yeah. So I think that there are a number of factors. Hotel rooms. If you're having a destination wedding, it can drive all of this up. Yeah. But I do think that the typical couple who is going through a second marriage, they probably do want something that's nice, that's memorable, but also they've already been tempered by a lot of life experiences. Right. They're not going to break the bank. Yep. For one day on a wedding, but they want something nice. So 30, 35,000, 40,000 probably seems like a pretty reasonable number. Yeah. If they have the money to do it.
And I think you're right, though. You brought up a great point. after so much life experience, you have a much better idea of what you want and how to get that done. And so by that time you're saying, look, no, I want that venue. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. That's what they've been to weddings. They've been across the Massachusetts, the world, maybe even. They're like, this is how we're going to do it. And so this is how we're going to do it. We're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk more to Gerry about everything weddings. And we can't wait to see you back here in just a few minutes. In the meantime, please go to Be Remembered for all your wedding needs from photography, videography, event planning, DJ, and more. Give us a call today, and we'd love to chat with you about how to make your day a wonderful wedding experience. Right at BeRememberedWeddings.com. We'll be back here in just a few. My name is Daniel Krikorian, and we're on the Wonderful Wedding Podcast. See you guys in just a few seconds. Thanks.
Every step, writing stories that seek to be read, taking hold of the moment as we discover every color filled with wonder. Now we finally see we got everything we need. Here we go. All we need is an open road and a chance to see a never-ending world that's beautiful. Here we go, with the sunlight on our skin. It's a brand new day, it's ours to take, and we will let it in. This is where the adventure begins.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Wonderful World of Weddings. My name is Daniel Krikorian. I'm so happy to have you here. I have a wonderful guest, Gerry, from Making Money Last, right on WCRN, and we're so happy to have our WCRN colleagues with us on this show because they just create such a great insight. Today, we're actually bringing a different side of the wedding industry, talking less about vendors and how to create financial responsibility with your wedding and all of your future assets. So Gerry is going to talk to us about all things money. But before we get into that, I do want to let you know, go to Be Remembered Weddings for all things weddings. This show is brought to you by Be Remembered, where you can get your photography, videography, event planning, DJ, coordination, photo booth, makeup, and more. So give us a call today or jump on BeRememberedWeddings.com to find everything you need to make a wonderful wedding. Now, Gerry, we've been having a great conversation about all the stats of the wedding industry, when people are getting married, how much they're spending. But I think we really want to talk about how to save for that big day. So whether it's you personally or the parents who, are typically listening in, what would you recommend doing, and how much, I know we were talking about modest amounts during the break, but is there a certain amount you're telling parents or percentage? How do we do? What do we think?
Well, I think, Dan, it starts all with your vision of what you want your wedding to look like, what you want your wedding day to look like.
Right.
You have to come up with an overall budget, right? So it has to be tempered against reality, right? How much can you actually afford for this? So once you figure out what that amount of money is, whether it's going to be a $20,000 wedding or whether it's going to be a $50,000 wedding, once you figure out what that amount of money is, what you probably do not want to do is you probably do not want to dip into retirement accounts or borrow a lot of money and rack up a lot of debt. For the wedding.
Not a good way to start a relationship.
Not a good way to start a relationship. Most relationships break apart because of financial pressures. It's, it's pretty obvious. That's why most marriages fall apart. So you don't want to trigger that from the beginning. So I think what you should probably do, fortunately in wedding planning, you're going to have a little bit of a runway, right? Nobody can plan a wedding and get married 2 weeks later. It doesn't work that way. It's going to take 6 months. It may even take a year for the wedding to come about. So I think during that year, you have to have a plan about how you're going to pay for each piece of the wedding. And then as you go through that plan, you're going to have to figure out which pieces are more important than others. You're going to have to prioritize a little bit. Maybe we're not going to be, quite as generous on the wedding gifts to guests, and maybe we're going to be a little bit more generous on the flowers that we have at the wedding. So I think you need to kind of prioritize a little bit what's important to you. And then throughout that runway that you have between the time that you're engaged to the time that you actually have the event, the wedding event, I think you just need to budget and, save money and try to do as much of it as you can currently without incurring debt if you don't have to.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess, so from your financial background, is there a percentage or disposable income? How would you recommend this?
I don't think so.
No, there's not.
Think it's also, I don't really think so. I mean, it is a wedding. It's a one-time it's a one-time event. I've never seen any
Right.
numbers on that there's a rule of thumb or anything.
Right.
But I do think the problem sometimes with weddings and why people can get a little bit carried away, I just kind of suspect, I haven't read anything on this, is that there's an emotional component to it.
Of course.
There's a big emotional component.
Yeah.
And everybody wants this to be the most perfect day, and everybody wants a royal wedding in many respects,
Sure.
And not everybody can afford a royal wedding.
Right.
So you just have to temper it. I think you want to make it a very generous, very memorable, very nice event.
Yeah.
And, the videography that you do with these events, I think it's a great keepsake,
Yeah.
for future generations and so on.
Yeah.
But it all has to be tempered against not getting yourself into too much financial trouble.
Yep.
And not pouring everything into this one day.
Yeah.
But the starting point again for all of that would be choosing a realistic budget. How much can we realistically afford to spend on our wedding?
Right.
And then we'll kind of back into what the different components are of the wedding. Where can we do things a little bit nicer, and where do we have to kind of cut back and make things, a little bit less generous?
Yeah, I think goals and priorities, setting them and sticking to them are very important. That being said, one of the tough parts, and the reason why we do this podcast, is most people don't know what they should even spend. They don't know what a high quality photographer is versus a low quality. They don't, the market's so inconsistent, which is what we're actually trying to change. But that's something that has, we have our averages and our numbers, but I think that has been something for the couple that's been very difficult, because they go in and they say, okay, look, we have $40,000. We are going to prioritize photography, after our venue, after our catering, our next priority is photo. And then how much do we spend? Well, we're fighting, in this pool of photographers. Maybe we have to spend $2,500 to get the right one, or maybe we have to spend $4,000. We're trying to fix this right now, but that's absolutely a big problem with the budget. Is they don't know what they're going to have to spend because these people don't have consistency. We call it ego pricing. It's based off of the photographer's ego of what they want to charge you and how many weddings they want to do. If they want to be lazy that year and do 20, they got to charge you $6,000. If they want to do 40 that year, maybe they charge you, $4,000 instead. So that's been a little bit of a difficulty for most couples out there. That being said, have you ever heard of Richard Thaler?
No.
He created behavioral economics. So it was a merge between psychology and economics. And when you said that people make emotional decisions.
With behavioral economics,
Yeah, so he created it. And one of his whole concepts was, when you look at an economic chart or data set, he called those people trons. These are what they should be doing. But we all know that people are emotional, behavioral individuals. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. And so they make emotional decisions. And I think nothing is better to see that in action than your wedding, because what I tend to find is, a couple says, okay, we're going to prioritize photography and we're going to spend that $4,000. And then all of a sudden they have a few extra bucks in their pocket and they say, actually, we really want video, or video is actually, it's worth more to us. Let's pay $2,500. And so there's so much sporadic decision-making that I think you find couples by the end of the day, very few of them say, oh, we have money left over. Very few of them say, oh, we blew past our budget.
We live in an economy where people spend money.
Mm-hmm.
And they spend money in a lot of different areas. And when it comes to something as emotionally a charge as a wedding, people apt, I think, to overspend.
Yeah.
They'll tend to overspend.
Yeah.
Classic behavioral economics.
Yeah, right.
They really will.
It's just going to happen.
But I think it has to be tempered. So I think starting with that budget is a really important thing. Yeah. And then as I think about it, I would probably knock off the big items first.
Yeah.
Like the biggest item clearly is going to be the wedding venue and the catering, the reception. Where is that going to be? Those are going to be the big items. Are you going to do it at a restaurant? Or are you going to do it in your backyard? Do you need tents?
Yeah.
All of that. And then maybe from there, after you can kind of get that core, if you will, that's going to be most of the budget. Maybe from there, get into the more nuanced pieces of the wedding that, most people might not even think of.
Yeah.
Another big expense, of course, is going to be the wedding dress.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
It's too bad Filene's Basement wasn't still around. They used to have a great wedding dress sale.
Yeah.
But they're gone. But there are many great wedding shops that you can still get, runway dresses and all of that. So if you do something creative and you do a little bit of digging, I think that you can find some really, beautiful solutions that are very high end, really appropriate solutions, but you're not spending top dollar for them.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, what I tend to find is the couples who put the creativity into it, right? They put their heads together and they really find those creative, enduring solutions. They actually tend to have more genuine weddings. The weddings meet their personality. They're with people they love. They feel more connected, instead of the big production where they spent a fortune, but it's your run-of-the-mill wedding to a degree. It has no connection to the couple. You don't feel as connected to them and I'm coming in from a vendor standpoint, so who am I to tell? Maybe they're, truly everything they wanted, but I tend to find when you have two couples that truly love each other and it's their wedding and their day, they may only have spent $20,000, but it's a beautiful wedding. It's a beautiful moment in their life relative to the couple that seems so disconnected from that day. And
I agree with you. It's the old adage, less is more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really true. You feel a little bit more intimate, a little bit more connected.
Right.
A few years ago, probably about 10 or 15 years ago, I went to a wedding. It was a second marriage, and it was in the couple's home.
Mm-hmm.
They had an absolutely magnificent, beautiful home in Andover.
Mm-hmm.
Really beautiful place. And it was probably about 40 people, 35 people. It was catered. They had a piano player, a guitar player, as they walked through their living room and in front of this beautiful slider. And I think it's probably the most memorable wedding that I've ever been to.
Right.
Yeah, and it was very intimate.
Yeah.
Fewer than 50 people
Yep.
and in somebody's home.
Yeah.
It was a lovely occasion.
Well, Sophie actually was just talking about micro weddings the other day and how they're coming up. And I think the recession is kind of pushing that back in here. So when we come back from this break, we'll talk a little bit about some of those trends and how you can make the perfect wedding for your budget. Let's go ahead and we'll have Gerry back on here in just a few minutes. So thank you all for joining us. We'll be back right after these commercials. But in the meantime, please go to BeRememberedWeddings.com for all your photography, videography, event planning, DJ, coordination, makeup, photo booth needs. Give us a call today. Go to Be Remembered Weddings, send us an inquiry, and let's talk about how to make your day absolutely amazing. This is Daniel Krikorian from the Wonderful World of Weddings, and we'll see you back here in just a few seconds, guys. Thank you.
Every step, writing stories that seek to be read, taking hold of the moment as we discover every color filled with wonder. Now we finally see we got everything we need. Here we go. All we need is an open road and a chance to see a never-ending world that's beautiful. Here we go with the sunlight on our skin. It's a brand new day. It's ours to take and we will let it in. This is where the adventure begins.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Wonderful World of Weddings. My name is Daniel, and today we are talking all things wedding finances. I am with the wonderful Gerry from Making Money Last. We're talking about how to save for your big day and some of the trends that are going on here. Before we get into that, I do want to let you know that Be Remembered has absolutely everything you need. This show is brought to you by Be Remembered, where we provide photography, videography, event planning, DJ, coordination, makeup, photo booth, and more. So give us a call today to plan your perfect wedding and book everything all in one place. Right at BeRememberedWeddings.com, or give us a call anytime at 508-625-7152. We can't wait to talk to you to make your day amazing. Now, Gerry, before the break, we were talking about how it doesn't matter how large the wedding is, it matters how intimate and how important it is to you, right? I think that's really what it boils down to.
It's a day of love, Dan.
It's a day of love, exactly, right? And, I was telling you during the break, my parents on their second marriage actually got married right in their house, and they wouldn't have it any other way. Now, it's funny because they are very timid people. My father's not. My mother is very timid. Thank God she is, because otherwise he'd go off the rails. But, they got married, few friends, very small, micro-sized weddings. During COVID, that was the only thing that could occur. So you saw budget shrink. You saw people who couldn't get a venue. They had these intimate weddings, some of my favorites, to be honest with you. With the recession, we're seeing that come back into play. With less disposable income, people are trying to budget smaller. But now I really want to talk about how parents should budget for their day. Do you have a plan built in for when I know you're talking to older couples, but when we're talking to younger couples, do you say to them, hey, I'd start putting some money aside because those kids that you're planning for, they're going to get married someday, whether you like it or not. Let's put some money aside. And, how do we even understand or
I think it's kind of a life cycle thing. I think it's, it's probably not on your radar screen until your kids are grown.
Right.
So when your kids are young, you're more concerned about, am I sending them to public schools or do I have to send them to a local private school? And how am I going to fund that?
Yeah.
And then, of course, you start thinking about colleges. And then, against that backdrop, you and your spouse are also thinking about your retirement and other, financial aspirations, goals that that you'd like to accomplish in life.
Yeah.
But one day you do wake up and, those kids that were once young who were in high school or only in college, you see that they're now, in serious relationships. They're 30 years old. Yeah. And they're, considering getting married. So I think that it might be on the back of parents' minds, but I have met very few couples who over the years, very few parents who over the years have started budgeting for a child's wedding, 10 or 15 years in advance, when the child was, 10 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
I don't see that. They're more concerned about college costs and all of that stuff at that point.
Which I mean is a fair point, but
yeah. So I think that it's something that people do somewhat ad hoc. When I have clients who come in, and again, I mostly do retirement planning at this point in my career. When I have people who come in and we talk about their life and what's going on, they all say, "Gee, we need to budget $20,000 or $25,000 for a wedding." And most of my clients, not everyone, but most of my clients, anticipate giving their children an amount of money, kind of a lump sum, saying regardless of what you plan on spending for your wedding, our contribution is going to be limited to $25,000. Then we'll talk about where that money is coming from. For most of my clients, that money is just coming directly from savings. They don't have to dip into retirement plans or do anything too theatrical to come up with the money. They can they can just write a check out for it. It's not $1 million; it's $25,000. Most people in their 60s who are financially sound, have $25,000 lying around that they can dedicate toward their child. So I don't know if it needs a lot of forethought.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Or at least I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Most people are asking me which account should we take it from.
Right.
And typically we're not taking it from retirement accounts.
Yeah.
Just from cash accounts.
Huh. Yeah. Very interesting. And I mean, nowadays, and sadly, we saw that they're also planning for their own second marriage. So you have to find that from somewhere.
Many of them are planning for their second marriages. And some even for their third marriages. It's rather amazing.
That is. Absolutely. And, as we were talking, with Massachusetts, Massachusetts alone, $1.6 billion market in weddings every single year. So this is amazing. It's absolutely massive.
I had no idea.
I know. It's absolutely, across the U.S., I think it's $7.6 billion. So Massachusetts does make up a very large portion because not only do we have a lot of weddings, we also have a very high cost per wedding, which, you see this significantly drops.
In Massachusetts, it's the bar tab.
I know, right?
An open bar is a big cost item.
Yes. So. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? And so, like you were saying, you can't go anywhere to dinner without spending $34,000. But, we also have the destination portion of this too, which is really fascinating. We take Cape Cod for granted. We take the White Mountains for granted, but they're all within reach. And that's such an amazing thing for people. And a lot of, again, you have that demographic being built into the $178,000 like we were talking about. You have that being built into the parents who say, or to the family who may have grown up in Cape Cod that actually lives in Long Island or whatever have you, right? They have that second house. And so people with second houses have that money to spend it down there. So these are a lot of vacation destinations too, which I think are really, really interesting. And I guess again, this is such a fascinating thing. You get engaged with someone, you may or may not know their financial situation to a degree, and now you're hustling to not only create a budget, see what their parents have in store for them. From a guy's perspective, I'm like, okay, I'm about to get married to this woman. What do I have to budget? What are their parents going to loan us? What are we, all of these factors. It's such a chaotic state for the financials, and then knowing nothing about a purchase. Do you think there's any other purchase in life that you have this little information going into it?
Probably not.
Right.
Probably not. It's a pretty significant purchase, but I do think at the end of the day, it's going to be a group effort.
Yeah.
Most people, generally speaking, are probably going to get some type of contribution from the parents. Mm-hmm. They themselves, the young couple who's getting married, mm-hmm. they themselves are probably going to budget something that they are going to kick in. Yeah. And then also, beyond just gift registries, there are also cash registries.
Oh, yeah.
You can register to give, the couple a certain amount of money, a couple of $100s.
Right.
And if enough people do that, before you know it, you have a few $1,000s that they may indeed use to kind of backfill on some of the wedding expenses afterwards. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really kind of a group effort, so it doesn't fall completely on one person's shoulders. Mm-hmm. And just to kind of clarify, because we did speak about that $178,000 wedding number earlier, for over $200,000 a year wage earners. Yep. If you can afford it, I am 110% in favor of it, of spending a lot of money on a wedding, if you can afford it. I just think that you have to come up with a realistic budget that you truly can afford. It shouldn't be a day that for the first 10 years of the wedding creates a huge financial hardship for this couple.
Of course.
That's just a formula for disaster.
Yeah.
So I think it has to be tempered with reality. And don't forget, if things work out great in your life, as everybody hopes that they do, after you're married for 10 years, maybe you'll get, married again, just recreate your wedding ceremony and maybe do it in a more elaborate way that you'd always envisioned, but you couldn't afford 10 years earlier.
Yeah, that's what a vow renewal is, right?
Right, exactly. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. And in fact, it's probably really a wonderful thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something to aspire to.
Yeah. The one thing, I don't know, this is just coming to the top of my head. Yeah. Are there any tools out there that you recommend for people to use for any of their financials in terms of budgeting? I've used the old Excel sheet where it, kind of gives you the pie chart and you plug it all in. You say, here's my budget, and it breaks it apart. Obviously, for financial advisement, you have better tools than this for any type of investment. But, is there anything people can utilize?
We do. So in my practice, we do some pretty elaborate budgeting for people, because people will come into my office and I'll say, how much money would you like to spend in retirement? How much income would you like to have? And of course, everybody says, Gerry, I have no idea how much money I'm going to need in retirement. So we need to help them come up with a budget. So we have tools that do that. Very generally speaking, we have people look at their expenses in two broad categories, Dan. We have them take a look at their living expenses. What does it cost to keep the doors open at your house? Yep. That's a very quantifiable number. And I would tell anybody putting together a budget for anything, you should probably start there. If you just go through your checkbook, you should be able to figure out what it costs to keep the doors open at your house. Yep. That's a very quantifiable, relatively easy number to come up with. Right. For most retirees, it's not a terribly big number because they've already paid down mortgages, the cost of college tuitions are behind them, and so on. But then you want to layer in the second number, and that second number is, what is the lifestyle you'd like to enjoy? So, you're young, Dan, while you're working, what is the lifestyle you'd like to enjoy? What type of house would you like to live in? What neighborhood? What community? What kind of cars would you like to drive? Do you want to belong to a country club? What is it that you want to do? So it's typically those lifestyle expenses that are a big part of somebody's budget. Yep. In retirement planning that we do, we'll take a look at the lifestyle expenses and say, are there a few bucket list items that you wanted to knock off now that you're retired? You want to go out to dinner a little bit more, maybe play a little bit more golf, a little bit more tennis, maybe volunteer at your church a little bit more. Take a few trips. In Massachusetts, a lot of people want to leave for January and February and go to Florida, a lot of retirees, just to kind of take the edge off the winter a little bit. Yep. It's a beautiful thing, but there's a cost associated with that. Sure. Where do you want to stay? Yep. How much are those 2 months in Florida going to cost? Yep. So I think coming up with budgets, you can have a lot of different tools. If somebody just Googles around, they can probably find an appropriate budget tool on the internet, for themselves. But then you have to figure out, how are we going to fund all of this when you add up your living expenses and your lifestyle expenses? How does this get funded? Yep. What are those sources of income going to be? Yep. For younger people, wedding planning, it's going to be income from employment. Yep. There won't be any retirement benefits or Social Security or anything else at that point until they're older. So they have to balance, I think, all of that out.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important that people have realistic expectations of what they can actually spend, what they can actually afford, for their wedding day and just for their lifestyle in general.
Yeah. So when we get back from this quick break here, we're going to talk a little bit more about that lifestyle and how to make that perfect day and how to finance everything for that. So we'll be back here in just a few seconds right here on the Wonderful World of Weddings. My name is Daniel Krikorian. I'm so happy to have you along with us. Thanks, guys.
Every step, writing stories that seek to be read, taking hold of the moment as we discover every color filled with wonder. Now we finally see we got everything we need. Here we go. All we need is an open road and a chance to see a never-ending world that's beautiful. Here we go with the sunlight on our skin. It's a brand new day. It's ours to take and we will let it in. This is where the adventure begins.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Wonderful World of Weddings. I'm so happy to have you here. My name is Daniel Krikorian, and we're talking all things financing on this wonderful episode here. Before we get into it, I do want to let you know to go to BeRememberedWeddings.com. If you're just in the beginning of your planning process, please note that we offer wedding planners, coordinators, and everything else you need for your big day. Go to BeRememberedWeddings.com or give us a call at 508-625-7142. One of our amazing wedding specialists is always here to help you walk through your day to make it absolutely amazing and to book everything you need from photo, video, event planning, DJ, and more. Now, Gerry.
Yes, Dan.
We got to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is there is one lump sum that occurs before all of this, and that is the engagement ring. Now, during the break, we were talking about the fact that someone told me, and I think the diamond companies, because they're good at this, I'm in marketing, all right? I did a deep dive. Those diamonds are not worth what they say they are, but that's something we'll leave off air for now. The real question is, number one, how do we save for this big little rock that we put on a girl's finger? And on top of that, I was told 3 months. You're telling me that's out the window. How did this all happen for you?
I don't know if I've ever really heard the 3-month rule of thumb, but it's probably a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
But I do think, again, maybe it comes into that emotionally charged piece.
Sure.
I think, you want to remember that this diamond ring that you're buying, at least this is how I think, Dan, is a diamond ring that's going to, theoretically be on that person's finger for the next 30 or 40 or 50 years. So I do think that, you want to be probably as high a budget as you possibly can allocate toward that ring.
Yeah.
Balancing what you're spending against it, maintaining that you have good quality and then going to a good outlet for the diamond ring, to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting. Yeah. But I think the ring should be something that's very special. I really do. So I'd like to see somebody, buy as big a ring as possible for their spouse.
What I find funny is that you used Barmakian.
I did.
James used Barmakian.
Yeah.
So it's been around for quite some time. Now, you were telling me about the story of how you chose a ring, which is a little different than the 3 month rule.
I've been married twice, but my first wife, who was the mother of my 4 children, who she and I were married for 15 years. And this was a very long time ago in the late 1980s. But I remember going to Barmakian as a relatively young guy with my mother. And my mother literally just picked out this ring. She said she needs this 2-carat ring over here, roughly 2 carats. It was a beautiful, just regular Tiffany cut, but a beautiful ring. And then, helping to pick out a setting. She was big on platinum, so she wanted a platinum setting for this 2-carat Tiffany cut ring.
Your mother did, or your
my mother
ex-wife?
Did. My mother did for my ex-wife. Yeah, my ex-wife, it was a surprise. Just popping the question, but having the ring right there. Right. But that was the counsel that I got: is that if there's one thing you can never be cheap about in your life, it is an engagement ring.
Yeah. Now, there's one other part to this engagement.
I don't know if it proved to be the best advice in retrospect. But it was for 15 years.
Yeah, right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Now, there's another whole expense here too, because I will tell you, I do appreciate the guys right now. They're paying for proposal shoots, which, they're not that expensive in terms of photography, but they're setting up these elaborate things. I mean, one guy wants us to go over to Nantucket, set up this whole event for him, and he's sparing no expense. I don't recommend this to anyone. I think a nice moment where it's some place that you two met, had a first date, anything of that nature. You do not have to spend a fortune on this. But was that a thing? I don't mean to say back in your day, because I understand there's an age difference and I want to be cognizant. But
it wasn't. So, So when I, was married again, I just took my wife. I was living in Andover at that point in time, and we were going to a lot of, Newburyport restaurants.
Yep.
So there's a restaurant. Outside the restaurant, she and I had shared our first kiss. And so a couple of years later, when I was proposing to her, I brought her back to that restaurant, and at that very same spot, got on my knee and had even a bigger ring from Barmakians.
Did Mom help with this one?
Barmakians loves me, by the way.
I'm sure they do.
Barmakians, I've been a very good Barmakians client when I think about it.
They love your whole generation.
They do. I walk in there and they're like, "Hello, Mr. Dougherty." So, practically.
They go, "Oh, you again."
They do actually say hello to me when I do walk in there. Yeah. So I used to go to the one in New Hampshire, so I wouldn't pay the sales tax. But
there you
now
go.
I go to the one in Natick or Framingham, whatever that is right there.
Yep. Well, before I let you go, you have 2 books. Well, you have one book already out. You have another one coming out.
I do.
So tell us a little bit about what the book's about, where they can find it, all the details.
So, Dan, my company is called Boston Independence Group. So we're a Massachusetts retirement planning firm, although we kind of have a national reach through the radio, through my podcast, and through my book sales.
Right.
So I have my first book, which is on Amazon.
Yep.
That's named Uncomplicated Money, and it's a complete retirement planning guide. So that's been on Amazon for about 4, maybe 5 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so this fall I'll be coming out with the second book, maybe by the end of the summer. And the second book is called Retirement is Within Reach, the same name as my podcast. And it's a much meatier how to actually build your own retirement plan. So we use an approach that's called the 3-pillar approach to building retirement plans. So Retirement is Within Reach will be out by the end of the summer, early fall at the latest.
And so let's just talk a little bit about your podcast. I'm sorry, your radio show. We do both, so it's just in my head. But the radio show, Making Money Last, when's that on? How can people tune in?
So for the past 10 years, I've been on WCRN, and it's on Monday through Friday, weekdays, every day, 5 days a week, from 11 to noontime. So as soon as I leave here, Dan, I'll be going over there to do my live radio program. And then on Sunday mornings, I join former Congressman Peter Bluth on his program, aptly enough named The Peter Bluth Show.
Yeah, right. That's a pretty easy one.
Yeah, so I just call in from my house from 10:30 to 11. Excuse me, from 9:30 to 10. And I give him kind of an economic rundown, what went on the previous week in Washington and in markets on Wall Street and all of that.
And so that's how we're going to wrap it up here, because I do want to just ask if you have any advice as you see the markets changing right now so rapidly. Last year, we saw a big dramatic change due to inflation where people really stopped having this disposable income. Do you have any recommendations about what people should do in the upcoming months if they're planning for a wedding?
If they're planning for a wedding, I would definitely segregate the amount of money that you're planning on spending for the wedding. I would just take that money off the table. So if it's $40,000, I would move $40,000 to cash immediately. I think that there are some real cracks in the sidewalk here in the U.S. economy right now. We see this with, the Atlanta Federal Reserve last week that does GDP forecasts. They just came out and they've lowered their GDP forecast for the first quarter. We still have inflation that's running very hot. We just got some inflation numbers this week. If you look at core inflation,
it went up.
That the Fed tracks, it actually went up to 5.6%.
Yeah,
that's a big problem. That's approaching 3 times the Fed's target level. Whether we're heading to a recession or not, I don't know. But most people think that by the end of 2023, second half of the year, we're going to go into a recession. How deep, how prolonged it's going to be is anyone's guess.
Right.
You have, with interest rates coming up, a lot of debt that's rolling over this year. And that's going to create a really big problem. So I think most people are expecting a lot of ugliness in the markets. So for your wedding, I would, segregate that money immediately. And then what you do with the rest of your money really depends upon where you're positioned in life. If you're young, none of this probably matters because markets move up and markets move down, and you're going to have 25 or 30 years before you're going to retire.
Right.
If you're close to retiring right now, it's a really scary picture. The only good news in all this is that for people who are close to retiring is that fixed rates right now are high. So when you look at what CDs are paying or some other products, you can get risk-free returns in the 5% range right now, which isn't the worst thing in the world when you have a lot of market volatility.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having me.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. And, again, I think it's so important for us to peel back some of the vendor side of things and talk about the numbers, talk about how to make this day obtainable, and also what is that reality for you. That's something that, we say a dream wedding. So we already know that we're telling people to go above and beyond the reality of life. So really kind of reining it back in, talking about what the numbers can do for us, how to save, how to do all these things, how to account for this in our lives. And, with the economics of this country right now, it's something that I've been afraid of for some time. Now, my generation likes to spread things out over payment plans and to do them over months and weeks. And sometimes that helps, but it also tends to lose track of money and
it does
keep you off goal, which isn't the greatest thing in the world. But again, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
And we absolutely love having all of you here on the Wonderful World of Weddings. Make sure to tune in as we bring on more incredible guests that can help you through your entire wedding process. We can't wait to see you next week, and we thank you for joining us today. My name is Daniel Krikorian, and this has been the Wonderful World of Weddings. Thanks, guys.